I'm Liam. I'm 25, and I walked out on my entire family with nothing but my car, my computer, and a secret I didn't even know I was running from. Before I tell you about the screaming voicemails, the threats, and the ugly truth that finally came out and blew our family apart for good, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in this. The clock on my dashboard read 5:03 a.m. The street was silent, bathed in the cool, gray light of a Saturday morning that hadn't quite woken up yet. My world, however, had never felt more awake. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every tiny sound was magnified. The scrape of my last cardboard box sliding into the back seat, the click of the car door shutting, the jingle of my keys in the ignition. Each one felt like a gunshot that would wake the entire house. I took one last look at the place I'd called home for my entire life. The lights were off. Inside, my parents, my older brother Ethan, his wife Sophia, and their 2 kids were sleeping. They were all sleeping soundly, completely unaware that the foundation of their comfortable little world, me, was about to vanish. A bitter smile touched my lips. They probably thought I was up in my room, the room I'd paid rent on for 7 years, sleeping like a good, responsible son. The son who was about to be kicked down into the damp, unfinished basement so his nephews could have a playroom. I put the car in drive, the tires crunching softly on the gravel as I pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back. Couldn't. My phone was on the passenger seat, turned off. I knew that in a few hours, it would become a weapon used against me. A storm of angry texts and tearful voicemails. But for now, there was only silence. The further I drove, the lighter I felt. The knot of anxiety that had been lodged in my chest for the past 6 months began to loosen with every mile marker that passed. They called this abandonment. I called it survival. To understand why a 25-year-old man would vanish from his family's life without a word, we have to go back 6 months, to the phone call that started it all. The call that lit the fuse on a bomb I never even knew I was sitting on. 6 months ago, my life was orderly. That's the best word for it. I'm a software developer, and my brain thrives on logic, on systems where things make sense. My life reflected that. I worked from home 3 days a week. My desk was always neat, my code was clean, and my finances were meticulously planned. On a whiteboard in my room, I had a chart tracking my progress toward my one big dream, saving up enough money to launch my own indie game studio. It was my passion, the thing that got me through long nights of debugging code. Every dollar I saved was a pixel of that dream coming to life. I had lived with my parents, Richard and Helen, since, well, forever. When I turned 18 and got my first real job, I offered to pay rent. My dad set the price at $450 a month. It was fair. It helped them with the bills, and it gave me a stable place to live while I saved. It was a system that worked. For 7 years, that check was on the kitchen counter on the first of every month, no exceptions. I bought my own groceries, did my own laundry, and kept to myself. I was a tenant, really. A quiet, reliable tenant who also happened to be their son. My older brother, Ethan, was the opposite of orderly. He was chaos personified. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, even when everything he did was wrong. He dropped out of college twice, bounced between a dozen get-rich-quick schemes, and had a resume full of jobs he'd been fired from. But to my parents, Ethan's failures were just unfortunate setbacks. My successes, on the other hand, were just expectations being met. He got sympathy and support. I got a nod and a reminder to take out the trash. I'd learned to live with it. The imbalance was just a fact of life like gravity. I kept my head down, focused on my work, and poured all my energy into my game studio fund. That fund was more than just money. It was my ticket out. It was the finish line of a marathon I'd been running my whole life. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was deep in concentration, trying to solve a particularly nasty bug in a client's website. My mom's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, Mom. Everything okay?" I asked, my eyes still glued to the lines of code. "Liam, honey, I have wonderful news," she said, her voice bubbling with an excitement that immediately put me on edge. Her wonderful news rarely was. "You'll never guess who's coming to stay with us for a while." I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. I already knew the answer. Who, Mom? Ethan. And Sophia and the kids, of course. They're moving back in. I leaned back in my chair, the code on my screen blurring. Moving in? What happened to their apartment? Oh, it's just a little trouble with the landlord, she said, her voice breezy, dismissive. And Ethan's new business venture. Well, it needs a little more time to take off. They just need a place to land on their feet for a month or two. Isn't it wonderful? We'll have the whole family under one roof again. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. My opinion wasn't being requested. I was being informed. A month or two. I knew Ethan. I knew my parents. A month or two was a life sentence. Mom. I started trying to keep my voice even. Where are they going to stay? The house isn't that big. Don't you worry about a thing, she chirped. We've got it all figured out. It'll be just like old times. As I hung up the phone, the silence of my room felt different, felt fragile. I looked at my whiteboard, at the neat chart tracking my dreams. And for the first time, I felt a tremor of fear. A storm was coming, and it was heading straight for my quiet, orderly life. I just had no idea how destructive it would be. They arrived 3 days later. It wasn't a car. It was a caravan of chaos. Ethan pulled up in his beat-up SUV, packed to the gills with clothes in trash bags. Sophia followed in her minivan, from which my niece and nephew, 7-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Noah, erupted like tiny, screaming tornadoes. And then there was Zeus, their Pomeranian, a yapping, untrained ball of fluff that immediately tried to mark its territory on the mailbox. The invasion had begun. Within hours, the house I knew was gone. It was replaced by a foreign territory filled with noise, clutter, and a complete disregard for personal space. Toys littered the living room like plastic landmines. The TV, which was usually off or playing quietly in the evenings, now blared cartoons at a deafening volume from sunup to sundown. My quiet workspace, my sanctuary, became a thoroughfare. Lily and Noah would burst into my room without knocking, their sticky hands reaching for my expensive computer equipment. Kids, leave your Uncle Liam alone. He's working. Sophia would call out vaguely from the hallway, without ever actually coming to retrieve them. The first casualty of the new regime was a small, intricately detailed model spaceship from my favorite video game. It was a collector's item, something I'd saved for months to buy. I kept it on a high shelf. One afternoon, I came back to my room to find it on the floor, shattered into a dozen pieces. Noah was standing over the wreckage, holding a small toy hammer. My chest tightened. I wasn't mad at Noah, he was 4. I was mad at the entire situation. I picked up the pieces and walked out to the living room, where my mom and Sophia were having coffee. Hey, I said, my voice tight. Noah just broke my model ship. Can we please try to keep the kids out of my room? I have expensive equipment in there. Sophia gasped and pulled Noah into a hug, shooting me a look as if I just threatened him. He's just a boy, Liam. He didn't mean it. My mom jumped in immediately, her tone defensive. She's right, honey. It's just a toy. You can't get angry at a child for being curious. We have to be more understanding. They're going through a lot right now. I stood there, holding the plastic shards of something that mattered to me, being told that my feelings were an inconvenience. My room wasn't my room anymore. My home wasn't my home. I was just a background character in the ongoing drama of Ethan's life. The days bled into weeks. The promised month or two was never mentioned again. Ethan didn't look for a job. He spent his days on the couch, scrolling through his phone, talking about his crypto investments that had somehow led to him being evicted. Sophia made no effort to control the kids or the dog. The house was perpetually messy, loud, and smelled faintly of dog pee. My productivity plummeted. The constant interruptions made it impossible to concentrate. I started going to a coffee shop to work, paying for overpriced lattes just to get a few hours of peace. My sanctuary had been conquered, and I was now in exile, retreating further and further into myself, the resentment building inside me like a pressure cooker. I could feel something inside me starting to crack. The question was, what would break first? Me or this unbearable situation? The first crack appeared about a month into the occupation. It came, as most problems in my family did, in the form of a conversation about money. I was in the kitchen making dinner, trying to find a clear spot on the counter amongst a minefield of half-empty juice boxes and cereal bowls. My mom walked in, a strained, overly pleasant smile on her face. It was her. "I'm about to ask for something you're not going to like," smile. "Liam, honey, can I talk to you for a second?" she began, wiping down a perfectly clean spot on the counter. "I'm right here," I said, not looking up from the onions I was dicing. She sighed, a long, dramatic sound. "Well, your father and I were just going over the bills, and things are a little tight this month." I stopped chopping. I knew where this was going. "Okay. With 4 extra people in the house, you know. The grocery bill has just skyrocketed. And the water, the electricity, it all adds up. You understand." "I understand," I said, my voice flat. "I'm still buying all my own food, though." "I know you are, sweetie, and we appreciate that," she said, patting my arm. The touch felt condescending. "But the mortgage is the mortgage. We need a little more help right now. We were thinking, if you could just increase your rent payment for a little while. Just until Ethan gets back on his feet." I put the knife down and finally turned to face her. "Increase it? To how much?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. She stared at a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. $950 a month. The number hung in the air between us. More than double. I felt a hot flash of anger. $950? Mom, that's insane. What is Ethan paying? Her expression hardened. "Don't bring your brother into this. This is about you helping your family." "He is the family that needs help," I shot back, my voice rising. "He's living here for free with his wife, 2 kids, and a dog, and you're asking me to pay more? How does that make any sense?" "It's not free, Liam," she said, her voice turning sharp and cold. "They are family, and family helps family. They are in a crisis. You are stable. You have a good job, a good salary. It is your duty to help. We didn't raise you to be selfish." Selfish. The word hit me like a slap. I had been paying rent for 7 years. I worked hard. I never asked for anything. And I was selfish. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and I saw a stranger. Someone who saw me not as a son, but as a resource. A line item on a budget. An ATM that was supposed to dispense cash and gratitude. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. "Okay," I said, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a cold, hard resignation. "Okay, Mom." I agreed. I said okay. But in my heart, something broke. The image I had of my family, the one I had clung to despite all the evidence to the contrary, shattered. They weren't just favoring Ethan. They were actively sacrificing me for him. They were taking my dreams, the ones I was working so hard for, and feeding them to his failures. I walked back to my room and closed the door. I looked at my whiteboard at my game studio fund. That $500 a month difference was a huge setback. It was 6 months of progress wiped out. I sat on my bed for a long time, the smell of onions on my hands, a burning in my eyes that had nothing to do with them. That was the moment the idea of leaving first took root. It was no longer a vague fantasy. It was a seed, a dark, desperate seed planted in the freshly broken ground of my heart. And I had a feeling it was going to grow. The rent increase was just the beginning. Once they saw I would bend, they decided to see how far I would break. My role in the house quietly shifted from son who pays rent to built-in, unpaid service provider. The most frequent service I was expected to provide? Free babysitting. It started subtly. "Liam, can you just keep an eye on the kids for 10 minutes? I need to run to the store," Sophia would ask. 10 minutes would turn into an hour. Then it became a regular weekend occurrence. "Liam, honey, Ethan and Sophia have had such a stressful week," my mom would say on a Friday evening. "They just need a night out to themselves to reconnect. You don't have any plans, do you?" It wasn't a question. My plans, or lack thereof, were irrelevant. My weekends were no longer my own. They were reserved for watching Lily and Noah while Ethan and Sophia went out to dinner, to the movies, or to meet friends. They would leave around 7 and stumble back in well after midnight, smelling of beer and cheap perfume. One Saturday night was particularly bad. They had promised to be home by 10. At 10:30, Lily, who had been fighting sleep for hours, finally started crying, wailing that she wanted her mommy. I tried everything. I read her stories, I got her a glass of water, I even tried to make shadow puppets on the wall. Nothing worked. Noah, woken up by the noise, started crying too. So there I was, trapped in the living room with 2 hysterical children. My phone buzzing with notifications from a project I was trying to finish for work. I texted Sophia, "Hey, when are you guys heading back? The kids are pretty upset." No reply. I texted Ethan, "Dude, you need to come home. Lily is asking for her mom." The 3 little dots appeared, then vanished. No reply. They finally rolled in at 1 in the morning. They weren't just late. They were drunk. Ethan was laughing too loudly, and Sophia was leaning on him, giggling. They saw the scene, me, haggard and exhausted, sitting on the floor between 2 tear-streaked, sleeping children. "Whoops, looks like we had a couple of party poopers," Ethan slurred, nudging Noah with his foot. "Did you have to let them fall asleep out here?" Sophia complained, wrinkling her nose. "Now we have to carry them to bed. Not a word of thanks. Not a hint of an apology. Just annoyance that their grand night out had ended with the minor inconvenience of having to parent their own children." My jaw clenched. I stood up, my body stiff with anger. "I texted you both hours ago. I told you they were upset. Where were you?" Ethan waved a dismissive hand. "Relax, man. We were just at a friend's place. You got it handled, right? That's what family's for." "No," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "This isn't what family's for. This is you taking advantage of me because you're too irresponsible to hire a real babysitter." Sophia gasped dramatically. "How dare you? We would never leave our children with a stranger." "No," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "You just leave them with the one person in this house you know you don't have to pay." The air crackled with tension. My mom, drawn by the noise, appeared in the hallway. "What's all the shouting? You'll wake your father." She saw the situation and immediately sided with Ethan. "Liam, what is your problem? Your brother and his wife deserved a night off. You're being so dramatic." I just stared at them, the united front, the 3 of them standing there, looking at me like I was the villain. Like my exhaustion, my frustration, my stolen Saturday night didn't matter. I didn't say another word. I just walked back to my room and shut the door. The lock clicking into place felt like a final, futile gesture, a boundary they would never respect. The following week, the battle for boundaries escalated from a Cold War to a series of direct invasions. My room was the last piece of territory I had, and they seemed determined to conquer it. I started locking the door when I left the house, a move that earned me a lecture from my mother about not trusting my own family. One afternoon, I came home from a coffee shop work session earlier than usual. As I walked down the hall, I noticed the door to my room was slightly ajar. I distinctly remembered locking it. My blood ran cold. I pushed the door open silently, and there she was, Sophia. She wasn't just in my room. She was at my desk, her back to me, one of my drawers pulled open. She was sifting through my personal documents, bank statements, receipts, my employment contract. For a moment, I was too stunned to speak. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. This was my private space, my financial information. "What do you think you're doing?" My voice was low, but it cut through the quiet room like a razor. Sophia yelped and spun around, dropping a handful of papers back into the drawer. She slammed it shut, a flush of guilt and anger coloring her cheeks. "Liam, you scared me," she stammered, trying to regain her composure. I was looking for a paperclip." "A paperclip?" I said, my voice dripping with disbelief. I pointed to the cup on my desk, overflowing with at least 100 paperclips. "You were looking for a paperclip in my personal files?" I I didn't know where else to look, she insisted, her eyes darting around, looking for an escape. Get out, I said. It wasn't a request. It was an order. You can't talk to me like that, she shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. This is your parents' house. This is my room that I pay for. I shot back, taking a step forward. And you are not welcome in it. Now, get out. Just then, Ethan appeared in the doorway, drawn by the shouting. Hey, what's going on? Why are you yelling at my wife? Sophia immediately burst into tears, the crocodile kind. He's being so mean, Ethan. He found me in here and started screaming at me for no reason. Ethan's face contorted with rage. He puffed out his chest and stepped in front of Sophia, blocking my path. What the hell is your problem, man? You think you own this place? You're making my wife feel scared in her own home. Her own home. I laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. She was going through my desk, Ethan, through my private financial papers. And this isn't her home. She lives here for free. I'm the one paying the bills. It's always about the money with you, isn't it? He sneered. You hold that over our heads like you're some kind of king. You know what? Maybe if you weren't such a cold, antisocial weirdo, people wouldn't have to sneak around you. The gaslighting was masterful. In the space of 30 seconds, he had twisted the reality of the situation completely. His wife, the snooper, was now the victim. The person whose privacy had been violated, was now the aggressor. My parents arrived, drawn by the commotion. They took one look at Sophia crying in Ethan's arms and me standing there, my fists clenched, and they made their judgment. Liam, that's enough, my dad said, his voice a low growl of warning. Apologize to your sister-in-law. Now. I stared at them, my mouth agape. Apologize? I felt like I was in a nightmare. These people were not just unfair. They were delusional. They lived in a world where facts didn't matter, only Ethan's feelings. No, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. I will not. I pushed past them, grabbed my laptop bag, and walked out the front door, slamming it behind me. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be in that house, in that twisted reality, for one more second. I drove around for hours that night, the angry words of the argument replaying in my head. I ended up at a 24-hour diner, nursing a single cup of coffee until well after midnight. I knew I couldn't avoid going home forever. I had work in the morning. I still had my stuff there. So, with a heavy heart, I finally drove back. The house was dark and quiet when I let myself in. Everyone was asleep. I tiptoed through the living room, planning to go straight to my room and lock the door. But as I passed the kitchen, I heard hushed voices. My parents and Ethan. I froze, my back pressed against the cool wall of the hallway. I just don't know what to do, Mom, Ethan was saying, his voice a pathetic whine. The interest rates are killing me. They're calling every day. We'll figure it out, sweetie, my mom soothed. We always do. There was a pause and then my dad's low rumble. We're tapped out, Helen. The emergency fund is gone. The credit cards are maxed out. There's nothing left. My ears perked up. This was new. They had always projected an image of being comfortable, if not wealthy. Then my mom spoke again, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that made the hair on my arms stand up. There's still Liam's savings. I held my breath, felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Helen, no, my dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. That's his money. He's been saving that for his business for years. It's his college fund, but for his future. It's for his future, exactly, my mom argued, her voice gaining strength. And what's more important for his future than making sure his family is safe and sound? Ethan is in trouble. Real trouble. Liam is fine. He's smart. He can make more money. He's got a great salary. We wouldn't be taking it. We would just be borrowing it. We'll pay him back, of course. Once Ethan's new venture pays off. My stomach turned. They were talking about my dream. The thousands of dollars I had painstakingly saved, dollar by dollar over 7 years. They were talking about it like it was a community piggy bank they could raid whenever their favorite son got himself into another mess. "He'd never agree to it," Ethan mumbled. "Not after tonight. He hates me." "He won't have to agree," my mom said, and her next words chilled me to the bone. "He has that savings account linked to our main account for overdraft protection. Remember when we set that up for him when he was in high school? I don't think he ever removed it. We could just transfer it. He might not even notice for a few days." I felt sick, physically ill. I leaned my head against the wall, my mind reeling. This wasn't just unfairness anymore. This wasn't just favoritism. This was theft. They were plotting to steal my future from me while I slept under their roof. The line hadn't just been crossed. It had been obliterated. The final thread of familial duty, of love, of trust, snapped. I didn't hear the rest of the conversation. I didn't need to. I pushed myself off the wall and crept back to my room, my movements silent and deliberate. I closed the door behind me and slid the lock into place. Felt flimsy, useless. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The first thing I did was log into my bank account and sever the link between my savings and their account. The second thing I did was open a new tab and search for short-term apartment rentals. The seed of a plan that had been planted weeks ago had just been drenched in gasoline. All it needed now was a match, and my family had just handed it to me. The next morning, I moved through the house like a ghost. I was polite but distant. I kept my answers short and my expression neutral. My family took this as a sign that I had calmed down and was ready to fall back in line. They had no idea that on the inside, I was a whirlwind of cold, calculated action. The emotional, hurt son was gone. A strategist had taken his place. My first call was to Mark. He was my best friend from college, a guy with a level head and zero tolerance for nonsense. I met him for lunch, far away from my neighborhood. "Dude, you look terrible," was the first thing he said. I didn't waste any time. I laid it all out. The invasion, the rent hike, the babysitting, the snooping, and finally the whispered conversation I had overheard in the kitchen. Mark listened patiently, his expression growing darker with every detail. When I finished, he just shook his head. "Liam, this isn't a family. It's a parasitic relationship. They're bleeding you dry. You have to get out." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm here." "Your old roommate, Dave, did he move out yet?" Mark grinned. "He moved out last week. The room's empty. It's yours if you want it. The rent is a bit more than you were paying before, well, before the surcharge," he said, making air quotes. "But at least here, your money buys you peace and a locked door that people actually respect." A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me. "I'll take it," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'll take it today." The plan was set in motion. The move-in date was Saturday. That gave me 5 days. 5 days to extract myself from my life without anyone knowing. Felt like planning a prison break. I started that very afternoon. I went to a hardware store and bought a dozen cardboard boxes, telling my family they were for storing some old winter clothes in the attic. Each evening, when I was supposed to be working in my room, I was silently, methodically packing. I started with the things they wouldn't notice. Books, old video games, files from my cabinets. I wrapped my precious model collection in bubble wrap, piece by piece. Each packed box was a small victory. I'd slide them under my bed or stack them in the back of my closet, hidden beneath a blanket. I felt like a spy in my own home. I learned the rhythms of the house, when Sophia took the kids to the park, when Ethan was napping on the couch, when my parents were engrossed in their evening shows. Those were my windows of opportunity. One evening, I managed to sneak 3 boxes out to my car under the cover of darkness, my heart pounding with every creak of the floorboards. As I drove them over to Mark's apartment, a sense of exhilaration filled me. I wasn't just packing boxes. I was packing up a lifetime of resentment and injustice. I was reclaiming my life 1 box at a time. The guilt I thought I would feel was completely absent, replaced by a fierce, protective sense of purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my future. And for the first time, I felt like it was worth fighting for. The final straw, The event that turned my quiet, methodical escape plan into an urgent extraction came on Thursday evening. It was 2 days before my planned departure. I was in my room, finalizing a project, when my dad knocked on the door. "Liam, we need to talk." In the living room, his tone was formal, businesslike. It was the voice he used when a decision had been made and he was simply announcing the terms. I followed him out. My mom, Ethan, and Sophia were all there, sitting on the couch like a tribunal. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was an ambush. "Liam," my dad began, standing in the middle of the room, arms crossed. "We've been discussing the living situation, and we've come to a solution that we think will work best for everyone." I stayed silent, waiting. "Lily and Noah need their own space," he continued. "It's not fair for them to be cooped up in one room. And since Ethan's office is also in there, it gets very crowded. They need a proper playroom." "Here it comes," I thought, my jaw tightening. "So," he said, finally getting to the point, "we've decided it makes the most sense for you to move your things down to the basement room. That way, the kids can have your room. It's bigger, it gets more light. It's perfect for them." The basement. The basement room was a generous term. It was a concrete box with one tiny window high up on the wall. It was cold, damp, and smelled perpetually of mildew. It was where we stored old furniture and holiday decorations. It wasn't a room, it was a dungeon. They wanted to move me, the only person paying a substantial amount of rent, into a cellar so my brother's kids could have a playroom in my freshly vacated, sunlit bedroom. The injustice of it was so profound, so utterly tone-deaf, that I almost laughed. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You want to move me out of the room I pay almost $1,000 a month for, and put me in the moldy basement, so Ethan's family can have more space, for free. It's not about the money, Liam." My mom chimed in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's about what's best for the children." "And what's best for the children is for their uncle to live in a cellar?" I retorted. Ethan, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Don't be so dramatic. We'll help you clean it out. It's not that bad. It'll be like your own little man cave." A man cave, a concrete box with spiders. The absurdity was staggering, but I knew arguing was pointless. I had seen their minds were made up, so I did the one thing they didn't expect. I didn't fight. I didn't yell. I looked at my dad, at his stern, expectant face, and I gave a single, slow nod. "Okay," I said. "Let me think about it. I'll start looking at how to move my desk this weekend." The relief in the room was palpable. They had won. They had finally broken me. My dad clapped me on the shoulder. "That's my boy. Knew you'd see reason." They saw compliance. What I gave them was misdirection. I walked back to my room, their victory echoing in the hallway. I closed the door, and a grim smile spread across my face. They thought they were giving me a deadline of the weekend. They had no idea I had my own deadline. I pulled out my phone and texted Mark. "Change of plans. The timeline just moved up. It's happening tonight." The house settled into a deep, satisfied slumber around 11. They were all sleeping the sleep of the victorious. They had asserted their dominance, and I had, in their eyes, finally accepted my place at the bottom of the family hierarchy. They didn't know that while they were dreaming, I was preparing for my revolution. For the next 4 hours, I moved with a silent, focused intensity one didn't know I possessed. I took down my posters, emptied my drawers, and carefully packed my computer and monitors into their original boxes. Every item I packed felt like shedding a layer of my old life. The air in the room grew emptier, colder. It was no longer my room. It was just a space I was vacating. At 4 a.m., Mark pulled up to the curb, his headlights off. He had come in his brother's pickup truck. We worked in near-perfect silence, communicating with hand gestures and whispers. We moved my desk, my chair, the stacks of boxes I had hidden in my closet. Each trip down the stairs was a tightrope walk of adrenaline. The creak of a floorboard, the scrape of a box against the wall. Every sound was a potential alarm. The last item to go was my whiteboard, my dream board. As I carried it out the door, I paused. It was covered in plans, goals, and a savings chart that now felt like a relic from another life. A life where I thought hard work and patience would be enough. I erased it all with one swipe of my hand, leaving a blank, white surface. A new beginning. By 4:50 a.m., it was done. My room was empty, save for the bed and dresser that belonged to the house. It looked sterile, anonymous, like a motel room that had been stripped bare. Mark gave me a solid pat on the back. "You did it, man. You're out." He got in his truck and drove away, leaving me to perform the final act alone. I walked through the silent house one last time. I looked into the living room, at the faint outlines of the couches where my family had sat in judgment of me just hours before. I thought about leaving a note, a long, angry letter detailing every injustice, every betrayal. But what was the point? They wouldn't understand. They would just twist my words, paint me as the villain, the ungrateful son. I decided my actions would be my message. My absence would be the only explanation they deserved. I walked into the kitchen and placed my bedroom key on the counter, right next to the spot where I used to leave my rent check. It was a small, symbolic gesture, but it felt monumental. It was my final payment, my severance from this toxic contract. As I walked out the front door for the last time, the first hint of dawn was breaking on the horizon. The air was cool and crisp. I got in my car, the engine turning over with a quiet hum. I didn't look back as I pulled away from the curb. I drove towards the rising sun, a strange mix of terror and exhilarating freedom washing over me. I had no idea what the future held. All I knew was that I was finally in the driver's seat, and I was never, ever going back. I spent most of Saturday in a daze, helping Mark set up my room in his apartment. We assembled my desk, hooked up my computer, and unpacked boxes. Felt surreal. The room was smaller than my old one, but it was mine. The lock on the door was a symbol of impenetrable peace. Around noon, I finally worked up the nerve to turn my phone on. I had put it on silent, but I watched as the screen lit up like a Christmas tree from hell. 37 missed calls. 12 from Mom, 10 from Dad, 15 from Ethan. Over 50 text messages. I opened the message thread. It was a timeline of their dawning horror. 8:05 a.m. Mom, Liam. Honey, are you awake? Your father wants help moving your dresser. 8:30 a.m. Dad, get up. Now. 9:15 a.m. Ethan, dude, where are you? Mom's freaking out. Your room is empty. This isn't funny. 9:30 a.m. Mom, William, Michael. You answer this phone right now. Where have you gone? Did something happen? Are you hurt? Please, baby, just call me. The panic in that message was quickly replaced by anger. 10 a.m. Dad, I swear, if this is some kind of childish stunt, you are in for a world of trouble. You have responsibilities here. 10:30 a.m. Ethan, you really did it, you coward. You just ran away. You left us high and dry with the bills. You're a real piece of work. Dad is gonna kick your ass. Then came the voicemails. I listened to the first one from my mom. It was full of choked sobs and accusations. How could you do this to us, Liam? After everything we've done for you? To just disappear? Your father is having chest pains. I think you've given him a heart attack. Is this what you wanted? It was emotional blackmail, pure and simple. The next voicemail was from my dad. No tears, just cold fury. You have until the end of the day to get your ass back here and explain yourself. You pull a stunt like this again and you are out of the will. I'm not kidding. You think you can just walk away from your obligations? You have no idea what's coming. The threat of being removed from the will, the one they probably planned to give entirely to Ethan anyway, was almost laughable. The inheritance was just another tool of control. I felt a strange sense of calm. Hearing their predictable, manipulative reactions didn't make me feel guilty. It validated my decision. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the loss of their primary income stream. I decided to send one and only one response. I opened up the family group chat, which was still a chaotic mess of accusations. I typed a single, simple message. I have moved out. I have paid rent faithfully for 7 years. I have tried to be a good son and brother, but I will not be treated like a living wallet or be forced to live in a basement. My decision is final. Please respect my wish to have no contact. I hit send. Then, before any of them could reply, I did something I should have done years ago. I went through my contacts and I blocked them. Mom, Dad, Ethan, Sophia. One by one, I severed the digital tethers that bound me to them. The silence that followed was the most profound and peaceful sound I had ever heard. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for sticking with me this far, you guys are amazing. Do me a huge favor and hit that like button and comment the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been on this journey with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It tells me that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest reason I feel strong enough to share the rest of this. For a few days, the silence was bliss. I settled into my new life. Mark was a great roommate. He was clean, respectful of my space, and we spent the evenings playing video games like we used to in college. I was sleeping better than I had in months. My focus at work sharpened. I felt like a man who had just been released from a low-grade, long-term prison. But I knew it wouldn't last. My family wasn't the type to respect boundaries. They saw them as walls to be knocked down. The confrontation came on Wednesday. I was leaving my office building, heading to my car, when I saw him, my dad. He was leaning against my driver's side door, arms crossed, his face a mask of thunder. He had come to my workplace. He had crossed a major line. Get in the car, he said. It wasn't a request. No, I said, stopping a few feet away. We have nothing to talk about. You're not supposed to be here. Don't you take that tone with me, he snarled, stepping towards me. You think you can just block our numbers and disappear? Your mother is a wreck. She hasn't stopped crying for 4 days. That's not my problem, I said, my voice cold. She has you and Ethan to comfort her. His face flushed a deep red. This isn't about your mother. It's about your responsibilities. The mortgage payment is due on Friday. We're $800 short. The money you were supposed to pay. I stared at him, dumbfounded. He hadn't come here to see if I was okay. He hadn't come to apologize or understand. He had come to collect. I was nothing more than a delinquent account. Are you serious? I asked, my voice dangerously low. You ambushed me at my job to demand money from me. After you tried to kick me into the basement? It's not a demand. It's what you owe, he shot back. You left without notice. You broke our agreement. Our agreement was that I pay for a room, not for Ethan's entire existence, I said. And you broke it first when you decided that room was no longer mine. As we argued, my eyes drifted down, and I noticed something. On his wrist was a brand new watch. It was a sleek, expensive-looking brand, not the cheap Timex he'd worn for 20 years. And his shoes, they were new too. Polished leather dress shoes that must have cost a couple $100. It was a small detail, but it was like a glitch in the matrix. It didn't fit the narrative. It didn't align with the story of a man so desperate for cash that he had to hunt down his estranged son for $800. A seed of suspicion, a tiny, dark thought, began to sprout in my mind. Were they really struggling as much as they claimed? I'm not giving you any money, I said, my voice firm. The Bank of Liam is officially closed. His eyes narrowed into slits. You're making a huge mistake, he said, his voice dropping to a threat. There are things you don't understand. You'll regret this. When it comes time to talk about the inheritance, you'll remember this day. Is that all you people think about? Money? I said, shaking my head in disgust. You can keep the inheritance. I'll make my own way. I walked around him, got in my car, and locked the doors. He banged on the window once, his face contorted in a mask of fury. I just started the engine and drove away, my heart pounding. The image of that brand new watch burned into my mind. Something wasn't right. The story they were telling was starting to fall apart, and I was determined to find out why. When direct confrontation and financial demands failed, my family moved on to their next tactic: psychological warfare. The smear campaign began. Since they couldn't reach me directly, They started going through the rest of the family, trying to turn everyone against me. My phone, which had been blissfully silent, started buzzing with texts from numbers I hadn't blocked. My Aunt Carol, my mom's sister, was the first. "Liam, your mother called me absolutely hysterical. I don't know what happened, but you need to call her. A boy should never, ever ignore his mother. She's not well." Then came a cousin. "Heard you abandoned your family. Not cool, man. Ethan is really struggling." They were painting a picture of me as a heartless monster who had abandoned his poor, struggling family in their time of need. The narrative was simple, effective, and completely devoid of context. Sophia, of course, weaponized the children. She sent me a picture of Lily and Noah through Facebook Messenger. Since I hadn't thought to block her there, the picture was clearly staged. The kids looked sad, holding a poorly drawn sign that said, "We miss you, Uncle Liam." The message underneath read, "I don't know why you're punishing them, Liam. They ask about you every day." It's breaking their little hearts. The manipulation was so blatant it was almost insulting. They weren't breaking. They were being used as pawns in a pathetic attempt to guilt me into submission. But the most venomous attacks came from Ethan. He started posting vague, passive-aggressive rants on social media. Some people forget where they come from. They get a little success and think they're too good for the family that raised them. A real man doesn't run from his responsibilities. It was infuriating. He, the poster child for irresponsibility, was calling me out. Friends who followed both of us started texting me, asking if everything was okay. The lies were spreading, poisoning the well, forcing me to defend a decision I shouldn't have to justify to anyone. For a moment, I was tempted to fight back, to post my own side of the story, to expose them for the manipulators they were. But then I realized that's what they wanted. They wanted a fight. They wanted drama. It was the fuel their dysfunctional engine ran on. So I chose silence. I deactivated my Facebook account. I sent a short, polite text to Aunt Carol saying, "Thank you for your concern, but this is a private matter I am handling." I refused to engage. I refused to give them the fight they were craving. My silence was my shield, and it was driving them absolutely insane. They couldn't understand it. In their world, everything was a loud, screaming match. The concept of quiet, dignified withdrawal was a language they didn't speak. But I was becoming fluent in it. And in that silence, I found a strength they could never touch. 3 months passed. 3 months of beautiful, productive, peaceful silence. It's amazing how much your life can change when you remove the people who are dedicated to holding you back. It felt like I had been driving my whole life with the emergency brake on, and I had finally released it. I was thriving. At work, without the constant stress and sleep deprivation, my performance skyrocketed. I was closing tickets faster, writing better code, and contributing new ideas in meetings. My boss, Mr. Harrison, a sharp, no-nonsense guy I'd always respected, called me into his office one day. "Liam," he said, getting straight to the point, "I've been looking at your metrics for the last quarter. They're outstanding. There's a senior developer position opening up on the new project. It comes with a significant salary increase and a lot more responsibility. Promotion. I think you're ready for it. The job is yours if you want it." I was floored. Promotion. More money, more respect, more challenging work. It was everything I wanted. It was validation, crisp and clean, from a world that had nothing to do with my family's twisted dynamics. It was proof that my worth was real, determined by my skills and my work ethic, not by my willingness to be a doormat. My personal life was blossoming, too. I reconnected with old friends. Mark and I had a regular game night. I even started dating someone, a graphic designer named Chloe I met at a tech meetup. She was funny, smart, and completely unimpressed by family drama. When I gave her the heavily abridged version of my story, she just nodded and said, "Good for you. Life's too short to be someone's scapegoat." I was pouring my newfound energy and my increased salary into my dream project. My game was starting to take shape, the code growing more complex and elegant every night. My apartment was my sanctuary. It was quiet. It was clean. It was safe. I felt like I was finally becoming the person I was always supposed to be. The guilt that I had worried would haunt me was completely gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace and self-respect. I had chosen myself, and it turned out to be the best decision I had ever made. But the universe has a funny way of reminding you that the past is never truly gone. It just lies in wait. One evening, as I was heading out on a date with Chloe, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello, Liam? It's your Aunt Carol." Her voice was shaky, strained. It wasn't the chiding, disappointed tone from her text messages. This was something different. This was the sound of a person whose conscience had become too heavy to carry. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice cracking. "Something you deserve to know. It's about your parents. It's about the money." I told Chloe I'd be late and stepped out onto my apartment's small balcony. "What are you talking about, Aunt Carol?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, then a shaky sigh. "I shouldn't have covered for them, Liam. I shouldn't have sent you those texts. It was wrong. Your mother, she can be very persuasive. But what they've done to you, it's gone too far." "What have they done?" I asked, a sense of dread coiling in my stomach. "The story about being broke? About needing your money for the mortgage? It's all a lie," she said, the words rushing out in a torrent. "Liam, your father got a huge bonus at work 4 months ago. A really big one. They're not struggling. They have more money right now than they've had in years." I leaned against the railing, my legs suddenly feeling weak. The new watch, the expensive shoes, it all clicked into place. "Then why?" I whispered. "Why did they need the money so badly?" Aunt Carol took a deep breath. "It was for Ethan," she said, her voice dropping. "It was always for Ethan. He didn't just have some bad luck with his crypto business. He has a problem. A gambling problem. A very, very bad one." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Gambling. He owes money, Liam," she continued, her voice trembling. "A lot of money. Not to a bank. To some very dangerous people. They were threatening him. They were going to come to the house. Your parents, they were terrified. They paid off the first part of the debt with your dad's bonus. But it wasn't enough. They were still short. And then the final, devastating piece of the puzzle fell into place. They needed my rent money," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The extra $500 a month. The $800 my dad demanded from me in the parking lot. It was all to pay off Ethan's gambling debts. "Yes," she confessed, her voice thick with shame. "They drained their own savings, used the bonus, and it still wasn't enough. So they turned to you. They lied to you. They tried to take your savings. They were going to sacrifice your future to save him from his." I was silent. I couldn't speak. It was so much worse than I had ever imagined. I had thought it was about favoritism, about unfairness, about them being blind to their golden child's flaws. But this was a conscious, calculated deception. They had watched me work, save, and plan for my dream, all while intending to feed it to the black hole of my brother's addiction. They weren't just enabling him. They were making me his unwilling sponsor. The hurt was immense, a deep, primal wound. But underneath it, something else was rising. A cold, hard clarity. The guilt I didn't even know I was still carrying. The last lingering whispers of, "What if I was wrong?" vanished completely. I wasn't wrong. I had been their last resort, their final line of credit in a long history of bad investments in their broken son. My escape hadn't been an overreaction. It had been a life-saving necessity. "Liam, are you still there?" Aunt Carol asked tentatively. "I'm here," I said, my voice steady, clear. "Thank you for telling me. I mean it. You did the right thing." I hung up the phone. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. Utterly and completely free. The truth, as ugly and painful as it was, had severed the last chain. I owed them nothing. Not my money, not my time, and certainly not my guilt. I stood on that balcony for a long time, watching the city lights twinkle to life. The ugly truth Aunt Carol had revealed didn't break me. In a strange way, it healed me. It cauterized the wound, leaving a clean scar where there had once been a festering infection of doubt and guilt. It confirmed that my instincts had been right all along. The old Liam would have been torn apart by this revelation. He would have agonized over what to do, whether he should confront them, whether he still had some duty to help. But I wasn't the old Liam anymore. The last few months had forged me into someone new, someone who understood his own worth. I realized that all their frantic attempts to get me back weren't born out of love or concern. It was the desperation of an addict losing their supply. I wasn't a son to them in the end. I was a utility. And when I shut off the service, they panicked. A few weeks later, a birthday card for Lily arrived at my new address. Aunt Carol must have given it to them. I opened it. Inside, my mother had written a long, rambling letter. It was full of "I miss yous" and "the family's not the same without yous." It talked about how Ethan was trying to get better and how they were all praying for a reconciliation. But nowhere in the 3 pages was there an apology. Nowhere was there an admission of the truth. It was just more manipulation, wrapped in the guise of motherly love. I took the $10 bill she had tucked inside, put it in an envelope with a birthday card I had bought myself, and mailed it to my niece. The letter I tore into tiny pieces and threw away. That was my final answer. My life now is quiet, and it's mine. My game project is getting closer to a playable demo. My promotion at work has been both challenging and rewarding. Chloe and I are still going strong. My family is now Mark and Chloe, and my other friends, the people who respect my boundaries, celebrate my successes, and would never dream of asking me to set myself on fire to keep them warm. I don't hate my parents or my brother. I just don't think about them. They exist in a different universe, a different reality that I no longer subscribe to. Pity them in a way. They're trapped in a toxic cycle of enabling and deceit, a cycle that I was lucky enough to escape. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had stayed. I'd be living in that basement, my savings account would be empty, and my dreams would be dead. And for what? To prop up a broken system for a little while longer? No. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away. Sometimes you have to burn the whole rotten structure down to build something new and clean and strong in its place. My family was a house, but it was never a home. So I left and I started building my own. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it was a long one, but it was important for me to get it all out. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace? I genuinely love to hear about it. Please share your own story in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Your support truly means the world.